After my son screamed, "You're dead to me," and took my grandkids, I exposed his darkest secret to save them. What I uncovered turned our family into the center of a nationwide manhunt, and then when people heard the truth, some stood with me, but others wanted me silenced forever. I still remember the way his voice cracked when he said it. "You're dead to me." My son, my only child, stood at the edge of my porch, jaw tight, eyes glassy, holding my two grandchildren by the hand. One was crying, the other confused. And then they walked away. Just like that. It wasn't the first fight we'd had. But this was final. This was a bullet through the heart. I stood frozen, the screen door slamming shut behind me like a gavel of judgment. "You're dead to me." He said it because I had confronted him. Because I had begged him, to get help. He didn't want help. He wanted silence. You see, I had started to notice things. Late nights. Twitchy eyes. Money missing. The kids neglected. A dark energy had settled around him like a storm cloud. But I never imagined what I'd uncover. After he left, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I only watched. I followed him. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted to save my grandchildren. It started with a pawn shop. Then late-night visits to the same alley. Then men I didn't recognize, tattoos, packages exchanged through car windows. I documented everything. Photos. Times. License plates. Every ounce of pain I swallowed, I poured into building a case. Then came the night I almost turned back. He saw me. His eyes met mine across the gas station lot. And for the first time, I saw fear in him. He knew. I knew. The next morning, I filed for emergency custody. The judge listened to every word I said with narrowed eyes and a clenched jaw. He flipped through the photos. He saw the texts. He saw the fear in my grandchildren's drawings. And when the gavel came down, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning. I had won custody. But I had lost a son. But that wasn't the end. Because the people he worked with, they weren't just going to let it go. They came looking. And that's when I realized. Saving my grandchildren was just the beginning. This story is only getting started. If you've ever had to choose between someone you love and doing what's right, you'll feel this deep in your bones. Like. Share. Subscribe. This is my story, and maybe it's yours too. Tell me, where are you listening from? Because I want to know who's out there, who's been through it, and who's still standing. You never truly understand fear until you win. Sounds strange, right? But when I walked out of that courthouse, custody papers clutched in my shaking hand, I wasn't relieved. I was terrified. Because now they knew what I had done. Not just my son. Them. Let me back up. My son, Nathan, hadn't always been this way. He used to be the boy who cried over Disney movies and snuck flowers into my hair while I slept. He used to build Legos with his daughter and kiss his son's forehead before bed. But something changed. It started slow. Missed calls. Bruises he couldn't explain. Burnt spoons in the trash that he swore were for cooking. Then the coldness. The paranoia. But I had held on. Because that's what mothers do, right? We hold on even when it's burning. Until he told me I was dead to him. And now here I was. Alone. In my house. With two children who kept asking when they could go home. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that home isn't safe anymore? I didn't. I cooked pancakes. I smiled. I played games. But every night after they went to sleep, I sat in the dark staring out the window, waiting for someone to come for me. And then they did. It started with the mailbox. I found it torn open one morning, legal documents scattered like confetti across my lawn. Then a dead squirrel on my porch. Then a man in a hoodie across the street, same spot every night. No phone. No movement. Just standing. I called the cops. They drove by, asked if I had any enemies. I laughed. Just my son, I said. The officer didn't laugh back. A week later, my car brakes failed on the freeway. The mechanic told me someone had tampered with the lines. I knew. This wasn't just Nathan being angry. This was his world bleeding into mine. The people he worked with were sending a message: stay quiet. Or you won't stay at all. So I bought cameras. Bolted every window. I moved my bed into the kids' room. Every noise became a threat. And then, just as I was beginning to crack, a call came. Blocked number. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Should have kept your mouth shut. A male voice. Rough. Flat. Little grandma thinks she's a hero. Click. My knees gave out. I collapsed right there in the kitchen. But here's the thing. That moment, on that cold tile floor, something broke open in me. Not fear. Rage. You come after me, fine. But you threaten my grandchildren? You make them orphans in the middle of the night? No. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to expose everything. I called a lawyer. A good one. I handed over the evidence I hadn't shown the court. The hard stuff. The encrypted backups. The names. The deals. I told him I wanted to go to federal investigators. I told him I wanted to tear down the entire network. But he warned me. If you do this, they'll come harder. And your son, he may not come back from this. And I said it, for the first time out loud, I'm not trying to save Nathan anymore. I'm trying to save what he left behind. That night, I didn't sleep. But not out of fear. I started preparing. Because if war was coming to my doorstep, I'd be the one who answered. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming what they tried to steal: my peace, my family, and my future. It was 2:47 a.m. when I heard it. I had just gotten the kids back to sleep. Emily had a nightmare again, the same one about Daddy's red eyes. She was 5. She shouldn't even know what fear like that felt like. I stayed with her until her breaths evened out, then slipped into the hallway to return to the living room mattress I'd been sleeping on for weeks. And that's when I heard it. A whisper. A voice. Not from the street. Not from the television I'd left on low. From inside the house. At first, I thought it was the old pipes or my imagination, until I heard it again. Clear this time. He said we're all gonna die. My blood ran cold. I turned toward the hallway. Lucas. My grandson. 8 years old. Standing in the shadows just outside the bathroom. Eyes wide. Palms pressed flat to the wall like he was holding the house up. I crouched beside him. Who said that, baby? He looked at me, terrified. Not confused. Terrified. Daddy, he came to me in my room. Last night. He said you were gonna get us all killed. I froze. No doors had opened. No alarms had gone off. I checked the security footage later that morning, nothing. But Lucas didn't lie. And I knew what fear in a child's voice sounded like. I called my lawyer at 7 a.m. sharp. He didn't sound surprised. Intimidation tactic. They're trying to rattle you. They're watching. They know the kids are the only lever left. I asked him what to do. His voice was calm, cold, what I needed. Go silent. No calls. No posts. Nothing traceable. And we wait. Until the feds move. So I waited. I kept the kids close. I checked locks every hour. I barely ate. And then, 2 nights later. I found the knife. Not in the kitchen. Under Lucas's pillow. My chest nearly caved in when I pulled it out. Just a little steak knife. But sharp enough. Cold from his hand. He was asleep, his small face tense even in dreams. I sat on the edge of his bed and cried as quietly as I could. In the morning, I asked him why. He wouldn't look at me. Just stared at the ground and whispered, "In case they come when you're asleep." I swear to you. I've never hated my son more than I did in that moment. Not when he screamed at me. Not when he vanished into that world of drugs and violence. But when I saw what he'd turned his own son into. A soldier. A scared, tired soldier. It wasn't just about the drugs anymore. Not just about custody. It was about rescuing my grandchildren from the idea of him. So I made a plan. If they wanted to scare me, fine. But I wouldn't wait for them to knock anymore. I went back to the alley where I'd first followed Nathan months ago. I parked across the street and waited. It took 4 hours. But he came. Same car. Same twitch. Only this time, he wasn't alone. 3 men got in. One I recognized. The others, I didn't. I took pictures. I recorded everything. They didn't see me. But I saw something else, something new. A woman. Young. 15, maybe 16. Scared. She was in the back seat of Nathan's car. She didn't get out. Didn't speak. But she looked straight at me. And she mouthed a word I'll never forget. Help. That's when I knew, this wasn't just drug deals anymore. It was worse. And Nathan wasn't just part of it. He was running it. This story? It was no longer about family. It was about rescue. And not just for my grandchildren. For her. For whoever else was trapped in his web. And I would not stop, until they were all free. I couldn't sleep for 3 days after I saw her. She was just a child. Same age as the girls I used to substitute teach in middle school. But her face. It was hollowed out, drained of safety, like someone had turned the light off inside her a long time ago. That single word she mouthed, help, echoed through my mind louder than any gunshot ever could. I wanted to run into the street, yank her from the car, scream, cry, do something, anything. But I didn't. I stayed hidden. Because charging in would have gotten her killed. Or me. I'd already risked enough. This needed to be smart. So I went home. And I built a wall inside myself. One side for the fear. The other for the fury. I called a woman I hadn't spoken to in years, Detective Andrea Foster. We weren't friends. We weren't even acquaintances anymore. Just 2 women who'd once been in the PDA together, before her divorce and my son's spiral tore our lives apart. I didn't start with a greeting. Do you still work on trafficking cases? She was silent for a long moment. Then, yes. Why? I think my son is involved. And then I told her everything. Andrea met me at a diner the next night. She wore plain clothes. Didn't bring her badge or a laptop. Just a notepad and eyes that had seen too much. I showed her the photos. The names. The times. And the video of the girl in the back seat, zoomed in, slowed down, crystal clear as she looked dead into my camera and mouthed, help. Andrea didn't speak for a long time. She just stared at the screen, jaw clenched, pen tapping against the table like a ticking clock. Finally, she whispered, "We've been tracking a ring in the area. This confirms what we suspected. But I didn't know your son was the link." Neither did I. Not fully. Not until now. I'd suspected drugs. I'd feared violence. But trafficking? My son, my baby? There's something no one tells you about discovering that your child has become a monster. You grieve the person you remember, while fearing the person they've become. Andrea slid a piece of paper across the table. Memorize this number. Don't write it down. If you see him with the girl again, or anyone like her, call it. This goes straight to our task force. Not 9/11. Then she said the one thing that sent chills down my spine. If he knows you're helping us, he won't just threaten you. He'll destroy you. I went home, locked all the windows, and started sleeping with a hammer under my pillow. I didn't tell the kids. They were too fragile now, too alert. Lucas still checked the closets every night. Emily still whispered prayers into her pillow, asking God to make Daddy go back to how he used to be. If only it worked that way. But I couldn't protect them by hoping anymore. So the next morning, I returned to the alley. And waited. And waited. 7 hours passed. No Nathan. No girl. Just dead air and rusted dumpsters. But then, a different car. Black Escalade. Tinted windows. It parked where Nathan used to. And out came a man I didn't recognize. Mid-30s. Bald. Covered in tattoos like a mural of threats. He looked right at my car. And smiled. Like he already knew me. I ducked down. Heart pounding. Sweat sliding down my back like ice. A knock. My window. I turned slowly. He leaned in, still smiling. And said just one thing, tell Grandma to back off, or next time, the little girl in the back seat won't ask for help. She'll beg for mercy. Then he walked away. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't run. I drove home. Made dinner. Read the kids a story. And then I sat on the floor of my bedroom and whispered to myself, we go to war. I stayed up that night writing letters I never intended to send. One for Nathan. One for Emily. One for Lucas. And one, for whoever that girl in the back seat was. The first one started like this, Nathan, if I die before this is over, I need you to know that I never stopped loving the little boy you used to be. But I will not protect the man you've become. It was strange how calm I felt. Not peaceful. More like the kind of stillness that comes right before a tornado flattens the earth. Because now, I had something to lose, and the people trying to scare me had something to hide. So I began planning. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Strategically. I didn't trust anyone but Andrea. And even she said this was going to get darker before it got light. Trafficking ops don't fold quietly, she warned me. Especially when they're built on people who know how to blend in. Nathan was blending in perfectly. Living in a rented townhouse 2 neighborhoods over. No car registered in his name. No bank account. No online activity that led back to him. But I knew how to trace ghosts. You see, Nathan had a weakness. He always needed someone to see him. Even when he was hiding. Especially then. So I went to his old friend. Mark Daly. The same Mark who used to sleep over in our basement in high school. Mark opened the door with a cigarette in his mouth and regret in his eyes. He looked at me like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. I know why you're here, he said. I didn't have to speak. He let me in, poured 2 whiskeys, and sat down. Your boy, he's too deep in. He's not a user anymore. He's a supplier. You think it's drugs. It's not. It's girls. I didn't blink. Didn't breathe. I know, I said. Mark nodded slowly. I told him to stop. Told him the feds were circling. You know what he said? I waited. They'll never touch me. I'm not the face they're looking for. I'm a white kid with a clean cut and a sad story. The system loves me. That's when I realized, Nathan wasn't just part of this ring, he was using the system's blind spots as a weapon. That night, I left Mark's place with names. Drop locations. Runners. Fake addresses. even the brand of burner phones they used. I gave it all to Andrea. She didn't ask how I got it. She just looked at me and said, "You want to be bait?" I stared at her. Bait? My voice cracked. Andrea leaned forward. "We need to catch him in the act. Not from a distance. Not from a camera. We need someone on the inside. Someone who can get close without alerting him." I laughed bitterly. "You're asking me to walk into the lion's mouth. I'm asking you to end this." I didn't answer her that night. But I already knew. I would do it. For the girl in the back seat. For my grandchildren. And for every mother who's ever watched her child disappear into someone unrecognizable. 2 days later, I sent Nathan a message from a burner number. Just 5 words, "I want to talk." Alone. No reply. But at 3:12 a.m., my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Nathan stood on the porch. No expression. No anger. No warmth. Just eyes that no longer belonged to my son. And he said, "If you wanted to die, you could have just asked." There was a time I could read Nathan like a book. The twitch of his jaw when he was lying. The way his eyes darted when he was nervous. The way he bit the inside of his cheek when he was guilty. But the man standing in my doorway wasn't a page I could turn. He was something else entirely. A closed vault with a gun tucked behind it. I didn't flinch. Didn't step back. Didn't cry. I simply opened the door wider and said, "Come in." He walked past me like he owned the house. Sat at the kitchen table. Same spot where he used to do his math homework. Same table where he ate birthday cake at age 8, crying because he thought we forgot candles. Now he sat with the weight of blood and money in his shoulders. I made tea. Earl Grey. Not because he liked it. But because it gave me something to hold, something warm in a house that had turned cold. I placed his mug in front of him. He didn't touch it. Didn't blink. Just stared at me. "You think you're clever?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm done pretending you're still in there." He smiled, just barely. A twitch of a ghost. "What do you want?" "I want to know who she is." That broke his stillness. His jaw twitched. Just once. But I saw it. "You followed me." "Yes." He leaned back. Looked at the ceiling. Then whispered, like he was amused, "You have no idea what you're walking into." "You're right," I said. "But I'd rather walk into it than sit in this house wondering which morning my grandchildren wake up to find me dead." His eyes dropped then. Not regret. Not shame. But something flickered. "You always thought you were stronger than me," he said. "No. I always hoped you'd be strong enough to fight what's inside you." He stood. Tea untouched. Fingers flexing like he wanted to hit something, or someone. But then he said the one thing that told me everything I needed to know. "She's not just a girl. She's leverage." Leverage. Not a person. Not a child. Leverage. My stomach twisted. I held back the bile. He leaned in, inches from my face. Voice low, breath sharp. "You tip this boat over, Mom, and you won't just drown me. You'll drown everyone I've got tied to the hull. And you'd be surprised who's down there." Then he walked to the door. But before he opened it, he said, "You got your warning. Next time, I won't knock." And then he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't eat the next day. But I did call Andrea. "He's nervous," I told her. "Good," she said. "Now we move." She sent 2 agents in an unmarked car that afternoon. They parked 3 houses down. Disguised as utility workers. They were my lifeline now. Andrea handed me a wire the next day. Lightweight. Small. Taped just beneath my collarbone. I know you're scared, she said, adjusting the mic, but remember, he doesn't expect you to be brave. I'm not, I told her. But we both knew that wasn't true. Later that night, I got the second message. Not from Nathan. From her. It was a photograph. Slipped under my door while I made dinner. A girl, tied to a radiator. Eyes blackened. Lips cracked. And written in black Sharpie across her stomach, and no more warnings. I dropped to my knees. My hands shook. My mind screamed. But beneath the fear, something hardened. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was hers. And I was going to get her out. Even if it killed me. The photograph haunted me. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't look away. That girl, her face beaten, her body marked with a message meant for me, she wasn't leverage anymore. She was a prisoner. And I was the only one who knew where she was. Andrea showed up the next morning, alone. No agents. No clipboard. Just a gun on her hip and rage in her eyes. They've escalated, I said, handing her the photo. She didn't even blink. Just studied it like she'd seen 1,000 like it before. I want to know who she is, I said. Andrea nodded. We're narrowing it down. Several girls have gone missing in the last year. Some were never even reported. Parents too scared or too high to care. Then she lowered her voice. But this one, she matches a tip we got 3 weeks ago. A girl named Eliza. 17. Disappeared from a rehab van outside Fairmont Clinic. Fairmont Clinic. Nathan had been in that place once, years ago. That's where he learned how to fake healing. Do you think she's still alive? I asked. Andrea didn't answer. She didn't have to. That afternoon, I tore through my house. Not looking for something, remembering something. A box in the attic. Old junk, forgotten papers, burned CDs from Nathan's teenage years. And a sketchbook. Nathan used to draw maps. Whole cities, made-up neighborhoods, secret lairs beneath trapdoors. Back then, I thought it was harmless imagination. But inside that sketchbook was a map I hadn't seen in over a decade. Not fiction. Real. An old industrial park on the east side, abandoned since the early 2000s. He'd drawn every building, every alley, every tunnel beneath it. And one building, circled in red. Labeled in his scrawled handwriting, "No one goes here." I drove there at dusk. Didn't tell Andrea. Didn't tell anyone. I parked 2 blocks away. Walked the rest of the distance with my keys tucked between my fingers like makeshift brass knuckles. The building was still there. Crumbling, hollow, graffiti-coated. But there were signs of life. Fresh tire marks. A crushed cigarette still smoldering. A half-eaten fast food bag with a receipt dated that morning. I crept around the back. Found a boarded-up door. Pried it open just enough to slip inside. It reeked of bleach and something else, something rotting. I moved slow. Every step an echo. Every breath a gamble. And then I heard it. A sound no mother should ever hear. Not from her child. Not from any child. A scream. Not loud. Not panicked. Just sustained. Like the sound of someone who had run out of hope but kept screaming anyway. I followed it. Down a hallway. Past crates. Through a steel door that hung crooked on its hinges. And there she was. Eliza. Tied to a chair. Bloody. Barely conscious. She looked up. Our eyes met. But before I could take a step, a shadow moved behind her. And then a hand grabbed me from behind. Slammed me against the wall. The man from the Escalade. The one who smiled at me. Now he wasn't smiling. Didn't we say no more warnings? I felt the butt of his gun crack into my ribs. fell to the floor. Eliza screamed again. And then another voice, sharp, female, and furious, "Drop it. Now. Andrea." Gun drawn. Eyes blazing. In that moment, chaos exploded. Shouts. Struggles. Footsteps. More agents flooded the room. I crawled toward Eliza as hands grabbed the man and dragged him out. Andrea knelt beside me. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, even though I couldn't breathe. Then she looked at Eliza. "Is anyone else here?" Eliza nodded weakly. "One more, upstairs. I think." By morning, they had pulled out 2 girls, 4 men, and a ledger that detailed more names than I ever wanted to know. But Nathan wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. He had sent others to do his work. He'd stayed clean. Distant. Hidden. But the noose was tightening. And when he found out what had just happened, he wouldn't just be angry. He'd be desperate. And desperate men don't think. They destroy. The walls were closing in. But so was I. And I was ready for whatever came next. The house felt different after the rescue. Not safer, heavier. Like it knew what I had done. Like it was waiting for the consequences. Andrea had insisted on putting 2 officers on a rotation outside my home. Unmarked cars. Plain clothes. The kind of protection that doesn't scare away a killer, just slows them down. Eliza was in a hospital across town. She'd been stabilized, identified, and taken into protective custody. The other girl was nonverbal, too malnourished to speak. But both of them were alive. Barely. The news didn't report it. Not yet. Andrea said the bust had to stay quiet until they had Nathan. Loose threads, she called them. But I wasn't thinking about threads. I was thinking about my grandchildren. Emily still asked where her daddy was. Lucas didn't. He just looked out the window too often. And flinched when the floor creaked. It happened 2 nights later. The blackout. Everything went dark at exactly 2:06 a.m. Not the neighborhood. Just my house. I woke instantly. It wasn't the silence that startled me. It was the absence of sound. No hum from the fridge. No click from the thermostat. Nothing. I reached for my phone. Dead. I kept a backup in the kitchen drawer. Tried to sneak out of bed, but something stopped me. Lucas. He was already standing in my doorway. He didn't say a word. Just lifted his hand and pointed toward the hallway. Footsteps. Inside. Heavy. Slow. Measured. Like someone walking through a museum. Studying. I grabbed Lucas, shoved him behind me, and moved into Emily's room. She was asleep, thank God. I locked the door behind us, slid a dresser in front of it as quietly as I could. Then I remembered the attic crawlspace. When Nathan was young, he used to hide up there during thunderstorms. He once stayed hidden so long I called the police. He'd made a little nest, pillows, books, a flashlight. He felt safe up there. I lifted both children into the crawlspace, handed Lucas the small hammer I slept with. "If anything happens to me," I said, "you don't come out." "Not for anyone but Andrea." He nodded once. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Then I closed the hatch. And I walked back into the hallway. He was standing in the living room. Not masked. Not armed. Nathan. Just standing there like he belonged. "I thought we were done talking," I said, my voice barely mine. He looked thinner. More animal than man. Eyes wild, clothes torn, breathing erratic. "You gave them everything," he hissed. I didn't deny it. "I gave them what you chose to become." He paced, running both hands through his hair. "I should have ended this months ago." "You mean me?" He didn't answer. But he didn't have to. My hand inched behind the curtain where I'd taped a kitchen knife earlier that week. Just in case. Do you even know what they're going to do to me? He whispered. Yes, I said. And it won't be enough. He lunged. I didn't scream. Didn't run. I fought. The knife slashed his arm before he could get close enough to grab me. He howled and staggered back. I kicked the table over between us. Ran for the front door. But he was faster. Tackled me into the hallway. His hands went for my throat. I saw stars. Saw his face, furious, broken, sobbing. I loved you, he gasped. I needed you. And then, bang. The front door shattered. Andrea. Gun drawn. Officers behind her. Step away from her now. Nathan froze. Chest heaving. Blood dripping from his arm onto my floor. And then he did something I'll never forget. He looked at me, really looked at me, and whispered, "You always said I was lost, but you were the one who buried me." Then he dropped to his knees. And smiled. Like he knew something we didn't. Like this was just the beginning. They arrested him. Read him his rights. Andrea tried to comfort me. But I wasn't thinking about Nathan. I was thinking about the smile. And wondering who he gave up before he walked through my door. Because something told me, he wasn't planning to survive that night. Nathan had been many things to me in his life, my baby, my burden, my heartbreak. But now? Now he was evidence. Andrea told me it would take time. Paperwork. Interrogations. The process of breaking down a man like him wasn't fast, it was deliberate. They had him on trafficking, abduction, intent to harm. But I knew Nathan. He never walked into a room unless he controlled the temperature. And when he smiled in that hallway, bloodied, cornered, arrested, it wasn't surrender. It was strategy. So I asked Andrea a question I hadn't dared ask until that morning. Was he working alone? Andrea's eyes narrowed. No one in that world ever does. 3 days passed. I kept the kids close. We didn't go outside. I turned off all the lights at night, left my shoes by the door, like we were ready to run at any moment. Then came the knock. Not the door. The window. Tapping. Soft. Rhythmic. Deliberate. I opened the curtain. A man in a suit stood there. Not police. Not Andrea. He held up a badge I didn't recognize. Something federal. I cracked the window just enough to hear his voice. "I need to speak with you. Alone." He handed me a sealed envelope. Unmarked. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a single name. Handwritten. Margot Leonard. I didn't recognize it. Not at first. The man spoke again. "Your son named her. Said she's the one who protected him. The one who made everything possible. Said if he went down, she should go down too." I felt the cold rise up my spine like water in a sinking ship. "Who is she?" I asked. The man's eyes didn't blink. "She runs a nonprofit. For at-risk youth. City-funded. Highly respected. But according to your son, it's just a cover." He paused. "And we think, your grandchildren may have been scheduled to disappear next." My legs gave out. I dropped to the floor. Lucas came running, but I waved him away. Scheduled to disappear. I'd been so focused on Nathan, so buried in the rescue, I hadn't seen it, that the noose wasn't around his neck. It was around ours. And someone else had been holding the rope. Margot Leonard. I remembered her now. She used to visit our home. Years ago. When Nathan was first spiraling. She ran a community outreach group and offered him counseling. She was kind. Sharp. Unassuming. She'd brought books, cookies, even little toys for the kids. And now, she was the next target in an investigation that was far from over. Andrea met me the next day at a secure building downtown. She showed me photos, financial records, logs of children placed through Margot's mentorship program. Half of them vanished, she whispered. No follow-up. No trace. Most were kids like your grandchildren, family drama, custody battles, vulnerable. I stared at the list of names. A spreadsheet of ghosts. Why would Nathan give her up? Andrea took a long breath. Because she was going to give him up first. That night, I received another envelope. This time, slid under the door without a knock. Inside, a photo of Margot. Walking with my granddaughter. Smiling. Like nothing was wrong. The timestamp? From 2 weeks before Nathan was arrested. She'd already started grooming her. The last thing in the envelope was a note. Scrawled in Nathan's handwriting. Shaky. Familiar. Poisonous. You thought I was the monster. But Margot's the one who taught me how to bite. The case wasn't over. It had just split open. A second layer. A deeper rot. And now, I wasn't just a witness. I was the only one who knew how far the infection had spread. I kept staring at the photograph of Margot with my granddaughter, Emily. They were in the park just down the street from our house. Emily wore her yellow sundress. Margot wore a powder blue cardigan, the kind of soft, grandmotherly look that made people lower their guard. But now I saw it, how close Margot stood. Her hand gently touching Emily's back. Like she was already hers. I didn't call Andrea. Not right away. Instead, I went to my closet and pulled down an old storage bin. Buried beneath photo albums and deflated birthday balloons was a file I hadn't touched in years. Nathan's old counseling notes. Evaluations. Referrals. And there she was. Margot Leonard. Her signature appeared 6 times across different forms. Each time under a different title: Family Advocate, Outreach Director, Trauma Liaison. And in one case, Foster Placement Consultant. I remembered that meeting. Nathan had stolen money from my purse. He'd been gone for 2 days. When he came home, bruised and hollow-eyed, Margot had shown up the next day. She'd told me he needed structure. That she had a safe house. That keeping him with me might stunt his healing. I had said no. I remember how her eyes changed. How quickly the warmth drained from her face. Then she smiled again, soft and sugary. Said, of course. I only want what's best. And she never came back. Not until years later, when Nathan introduced her as his mentor. I called Andrea that night. She didn't groom him after he broke. She broke him. Andrea didn't sound surprised. We suspected she was using outreach programs to identify vulnerable kids. But this confirms it. She doesn't just benefit from the trafficking. She manufactures it. They opened a task force the next day. But Margot was smart. Too smart to rattle. Her nonprofit had clean audits. Awards. Photos with senators. So Andrea handed me a folder. Do you want to help us bring her in? It wasn't a question. It was an invitation to war. I knew the only way to draw Margot out was to make her think I was weak. So I staged a public breakdown. I pulled the kids from school. Let our grass grow out. Stopped answering calls. Cried loudly in the grocery store. Then, I did the hardest thing of all. I called Margot. Left a voicemail. Emily's asking about you. If you still want to help. I think I'm ready. She called back 2 hours later. Her voice warm, syrupy. Oh, sweetheart. I've been praying for this. We arranged to meet at her office. A converted Victorian house near downtown. It smelled like lemon oil and cheap perfume. She hugged me. Offered tea. Didn't ask too many questions. I always knew you'd come around, she said. I sat there, pretending to be tired, broken, confused. But inside, I watched everything. Her desk. Her bookshelves. The locked cabinet behind her. She leaned forward. You know, I've worked with children like Emily before. Girls who need gentle shaping. If you're open to it, I can take her for a weekend. Just to evaluate things. My hand twitched under the table. It was a test. She was gauging how desperate I was. Whether I'd hand over my granddaughter voluntarily. I played my part. Bit my lip. Nodded slowly. Maybe, I whispered. I don't know what's right anymore. She reached out. Touched my hand. I do. I left with shaking hands and a tracking device sewn into the hem of my purse. Andrea's team had audio too. Give it a few days, she warned. She'll either reach for Emily, or vanish. And she was right. 2 nights later, I received a gift basket. No note. Just cookies, lavender lotion, and a one-way bus ticket in Emily's name. Scheduled for the following weekend. Destination, Missoula, Montana. There was no school listed. No program. Nothing. Just a drop point. A one-way erasure. Andrea moved fast. Warrants. Seizures. Background checks. And then, the bombshell. Inside Margot's locked cabinet, they found dozens of files. Girls. Boys. Photos. Psychological evaluations. Placement schedules. A network. Children weren't just being taken. They were being farmed. And Nathan was just one of many harvesters. Margot was the architect. The raid happened fast. I watched from across the street as they pulled her out in handcuffs. She didn't cry. Didn't fight. She just looked at me. Tilted her head. And smiled. Like she knew something we didn't. Like there was still more to come. And I believed her. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I could still hear Nathan's words, "You'd be surprised who's tied to the hole." They took Margot without incident. No resistance. No threats. No dramatic outbursts. She stepped into the back of that unmarked sedan like a woman heading to brunch, polished, calm, smiling. But that smile haunted me. Because it didn't say, "I've been caught." It said, "You've only clipped one head off the hydra." I wasn't allowed to attend the first hearing. Andrea told me it would be closed to the public, too sensitive, too dangerous. Federal eyes are on this now, she said. Higher than me. But I kept track. The media still didn't know the truth. They reported it as misappropriation of grant funds and possible misuse of child outreach programs. No mention of the girl in the radiator. No mention of Eliza. No mention of my son. That's how deeply protected people like Margot were. Until they weren't. I thought it was over. That I could finally breathe. Maybe even begin to grieve everything I hadn't let myself feel. But then the phone rang. It was Nathan's lawyer. She wanted to meet. Alone. No court. No press. Just me, her, and a file Nathan had instructed her to hand-deliver if Margot was ever arrested. I almost said no. Almost threw my phone across the room. But something told me, this wasn't about closure. It was about prevention. We met in a hotel lobby, 30 minutes from my house. Neutral ground. I recognized the lawyer, young, polished, expensive. She slid a black envelope across the table. Said nothing. I opened it. Inside, photos. Not of children. Not of crimes. Of people. Judges. Officers. City leaders. All shaking hands with Margot. Smiling. And in the center of one photo, blurry but unmistakable, was Andrea. My heart skipped. I blinked. Looked again. Andrea, 10 years younger, standing beside Margot at a charity banquet. The lawyer leaned in. Your son said to tell you this. You trusted the wrong one. I felt the room tilt. My breath caught. Was it real? A manipulation? Insurance from Nathan in case he went down? Or worse, a truth I didn't want to see? I didn't call Andrea. Not that night. Not the next day either. I needed to know for myself. So I started digging. Quietly. Carefully. And what I found didn't make sense. Andrea's history checked out. Her badge number. Her cases. Her public record. She had taken down traffickers before. She'd saved girls like Eliza. She had scars to prove it. But then I found a report from 8 years ago. A sting operation, similar to ours. Same setup. Same tactic. The trafficker? Vanished before the arrest. And the file? Redacted in all the wrong places. Guess who signed off on the operation? Andrea Foster. I confronted her 2 days later. Met her at the safe house where Eliza was staying. She was waiting for me. Almost like she knew. I sat down. Didn't flinch. Didn't accuse. I just slid the photo across the table. She stared at it for a long time. Didn't speak. Then finally said, I was undercover. For 3 years. That photo? That banquet? I was already embedded in Margot's world. That's how I got the evidence that nearly brought her down in 2017. Nearly, I said. But it didn't. Andrea's face cracked a little. I was pulled off the case. Reassigned. Told it was a national interest situation. Translation: too many powerful hands in the dirt. She looked at me, exhausted. I tried to bring her down once. I failed. But when your son named her, it gave us a second chance. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. But the voice in my head, the one Nathan had twisted and filled with doubt, kept whispering, you trusted the wrong one. That night, I asked Lucas what he remembered about Margot. He was quiet at first. Then said, she used to give Emily candy when you weren't looking. And did she ever talk to you about leaving? Going somewhere with her? Lucas nodded. Once. She said Emily would be happy where they were going. That there'd be horses. And no more rules. My blood ran cold. But not you? He shook his head. She said boys are harder to place. I hugged him so tightly he winced. But I couldn't help it. They had almost taken everything. And still. Somewhere out there, others were waiting. Other Margots. Other Nathans. Other children on someone's list. I couldn't close my eyes and pretend this was over. Because Nathan's final words echoed louder than ever, you'd be surprised who's tied to the hull. They said she was protected. They said there were guards, cameras, coded entry. They said Eliza was finally safe. They lied. It happened 3 nights after my meeting with Andrea. I was brushing Emily's hair, she loved it when I did that, and Lucas was setting up our little movie night when Andrea called. I answered on speaker, laughing about something Emily had said. Andrea didn't laugh. Didn't even greet me. Eliza's gone. The words hit like a shotgun blast. I dropped the brush. Emily looked up at me, confused. Gone. The most important witness in the entire case. The girl Nathan tried to hide. The girl we risked everything to rescue. I stepped into the hallway. How? Andrea's voice was stiff, mechanical. No forced entry. No footage. No sign of struggle. It's like she vanished. But I knew better. Eliza didn't vanish. Someone came for her. Someone with a key. Someone who wasn't on the outside of this investigation. Someone who was inside the very system we trusted. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kids' room. Watched their chests rise and fall. And I remembered something from years ago. Back when Nathan was 13. He'd been caught stealing a bike. We sat in a small room at the precinct, and I cried harder than he did. He looked at me with dry eyes and said, "It's not stealing if you never get caught." Back then, I thought he was just parroting a movie. Now I wondered who had taught him that. The next day, I made a list. Not of enemies. Not of suspects. Of survivors. I called Mark Daly, Nathan's old friend, the one who'd given me names. He was reluctant to talk again, said he'd already given enough. But I told him Eliza was gone. That got his attention. He agreed to meet. Neutral place. A diner just off the interstate. Wide windows. Bright lights. Harder to disappear someone from a place like that. I left Andrea out of it. Not because I didn't trust her. But because I didn't trust anything anymore. Mark looked worse than before. Thinner. Sweaty. Jumpy. He slid into the booth across from me and immediately glanced over both shoulders. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered. "You shouldn't either. I need to know what Nathan was involved in." Beyond Margot. Mark exhaled slowly. There was another name. Way above Margot. Someone they called the broker. The broker? He nodded. "I don't know who he is. Or where. But Nathan talked about him like he was a ghost. Rich. Invisible. Ruthless. He funds the placements. Tracks the movement. Buys silence. Even law enforcement." Mark leaned in closer. "And get this, he doesn't take kids. He collects families." That word chilled me. Families? Mark nodded again, voice dropping further. "If he finds a kid he wants, he doesn't just snatch them. He studies them. Studies their parents. Their routines. Their fears. And then he dismantles the whole house piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the kid, standing there with no one left to say no." My hands went cold. Mark whispered one more thing before he stood up and left. "They've already started with you. The lights out. The calls. The missing girl. It's not random. It's conditioning." I drove home in silence. I wanted to believe he was paranoid. That this was just trauma talking. But when I turned onto my street, my house was wide open. Front door. Windows. All of it. I rushed inside. Screamed for the kids. Found them in the pantry, hiding under shelves. "He was inside," Lucas whispered. He said he just wanted to look around. Emily was shaking. Clutching a stuffed bear so tightly it seems tore. I checked every room. Found nothing missing. Nothing broken. Just disturbed. Drawers open. Pillows flipped. A half-eaten sandwich left on the table. Like someone was making themselves comfortable. Andrea came. So did police. They filed reports. Took fingerprints. Promised patrols. But we all knew the truth. Whoever had done this didn't care about evidence. They weren't after valuables. They were after a message. And it was loud and clear: "We know where you sleep. And we're not done." I moved us that night. To a motel. Under fake names. Paid in cash. But sleep wouldn't come. Because as I lay there in that unfamiliar bed, I realized something horrible. They had already taken Eliza. They had already turned Nathan. And now they were circling Emily. And the broker? He was still out there. Watching. Waiting. The motel walls were paper thin. I could hear the couple next door arguing. I could hear the ice machine coughing down the hall. I could hear Emily breathing in her sleep and Lucas rolling over for the 10th time. But more than anything, I could hear my own thoughts. There was a moment, just before dawn, where I wondered what would have happened if I had said yes to Margot. If I had handed over Emily, like so many other broken parents had. If I'd convinced myself it was for her own good. I would have told myself lies, I'm sure. That she'd be safe. That she'd be cared for. That I was doing the right thing. And then she would have vanished. Like Eliza almost had. Like dozens, maybe hundreds, already had. At 6:42 a.m., my burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. The voice on the other end was low, mechanical, modified. A distortion. You've made this very difficult, the voice said. I didn't speak. Margot was an asset. Replaceable. But annoying to lose. You, however, are something else entirely. My jaw clenched. A mistake? I asked. No, the voice replied. A story. There was a pause. People like you, your fuel. Your grief, your rage, it inspires a kind of desperation that can be useful. But lately, you've become messy. I swallowed. Are you the broker? A brief silence. Names don't matter. Only what's owned. And then a sound, metal scraping. A child's laugh. Emily's laugh. Not from the phone. From the room. I dropped the phone. Ran to the bed. Emily was still sleeping. Lucas too. The sound wasn't coming from them. It was coming from the television. The motel TV. Turned on by itself. Showing static. And in that static, a frame. A still image. Emily, at the park. Alone. Timestamped, yesterday. 3:18 p.m. My knees buckled. The screen blinked off. Black. That was his signature. The broker didn't send letters. He didn't make threats. He made impressions. And now I had one. I called Andrea, breathing fast, explaining everything, the call, the voice, the image, the laugh. She was silent for several beats. Then said something I didn't expect. We think he's not a he. What? The broker. We've been tracing voice mods, financials, communications. Everything points to a team. 2, maybe 3. One of them is local. The others, offshore. But this voice, the one you heard, that's the same one a witness described from a missing girl's last known contact in 2018. So they've been doing this, for years? Andrea hesitated. We have reason to believe decades. That's when I understood. Why Nathan smiled. Why Margot surrendered. Why Eliza was taken so easily. This wasn't a trafficking ring. It was an industry. Margot was middle management. Nathan was a runner. The broker, they were the infrastructure. And I had just been upgraded. From nuisance, to target of interest. I didn't send the kids to school again. Didn't return to the house. I drove 4 hours north. To a woman I hadn't seen in 12 years. My sister. Claire. We hadn't spoken since the fight after our mother's funeral. But blood doesn't care about grudges. And right now, I needed a place no one knew. She didn't ask questions. Just looked at my face and opened the door. Emily ran to the backyard. Lucas followed. For the first time in days, they smiled. Claire made tea. I told her everything. She sat quietly, fingers curled around her mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. And then she said, "There's something you don't know about Nathan." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Claire stood, went to a drawer, pulled out a box. Inside, letters. Dozens. All addressed to her. From Nathan. I reached for the top one. She stopped me. "They're not what you think. He didn't write them to apologize. He wrote them to confess." We read them all. One by one. Each letter filled in another piece of the puzzle. Names. Dates. Deals. Shame. But one name appeared 6 times, always underlined, always with the same final sentence: "They report to Halberd." That was the broker. The real one. Halberd wasn't a name. It was a code word. Possibly a group. Possibly a person. But Nathan feared it more than he feared prison. And the last line of the last letter read, "If you're reading this, it means they've come for her. Protect her. Please. Don't let Emily disappear like the others." He knew. He knew they would come for her. He knew he couldn't stop it. So he tried to buy time. Even if it meant turning on Margot. Even if it meant facing me. Nathan didn't smile because he won. He smiled because he delayed the inevitable. And now? It was my turn to delay them. Or destroy them. Claire's kitchen was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. I reread Nathan's last letter again, my hands trembling. "If you're reading this, it means they've come for her. Protect her. Please. Don't let Emily disappear like the others." His words were a warning. A plea. And now, a threat hanging over us like a noose. I knew what had to be done. Andrea agreed to meet at Claire's house the next day. She brought a small team, undercover agents, tech specialists, and a woman I barely recognized but trusted instantly. Her name was Jasmine. She wasn't like anyone I'd met in law enforcement before. You could see it in the way she moved, deliberate and sharp. Like a hawk scanning the horizon for prey. Jasmine leaned in, eyes cold and steady. "The broker's network runs deep. We're talking families, businesses, even public officials. Their reach extends to private security firms and cyber warfare units. You're in the crosshairs now." I swallowed. "And Emily?" "We're going to shield her like she's the president," Jasmine said flatly. "But you'll need to help. You're the bait." I nodded. That night, Claire and I stayed up late. Talking. Planning. She told me things about Nathan I never knew. Secrets hidden in his childhood. Moments where he'd shown glimpses of the boy he used to be. Before the darkness swallowed him whole. And the worst part? She admitted she'd suspected Margot long before I did. But she'd been too afraid to act. Too scared to lose her own children. I hugged her tight. "We can't be afraid anymore." The next morning, Jasmine set up a command center in Claire's basement. Screens flickered with live feeds. Maps lit up with pins and routes. Every call, every message, every movement tracked. Andrea and Jasmine worked around the clock. Claire helped with the kids. And I waited. Then, the call came. A tip. A lead. A chance. A shipment. The largest yet. Scheduled to move through an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. If we intercepted it, we could dismantle a huge piece of the network. We could find proof. We could bring Halberd down. But it would be dangerous. And I would have to be there. We prepared. Emily stayed with Claire. Lucas and I dressed in black, armed with cameras and hidden microphones. Andrea's team swept the area. Jasmine coordinated from the command center. I was the bait. The warehouse was dark and cold. The smell of oil and rust hung heavy. I slipped inside, heart pounding. Voices echoed in the shadows. Men unloading crates. Women moving silently. I tried to stay invisible. But then, a hand grabbed my arm. "Thought you were smarter," a voice hissed. I turned. It was Mark Daly. He looked scared. "Not you," he whispered. "They're watching. They know." Suddenly, the warehouse lights blazed on. Trapped. The broker was here. And this time, he wasn't alone. The warehouse flooded with light, harsh and unrelenting, burning away every shadow where we might have hidden. Men surrounded me, faces hard, eyes cold, guns drawn but not yet aimed. Mark Daly was at my side, his face pale, sweat dripping from his brow. "They're moving fast," he muttered. Before I could respond, a voice echoed from the shadows. Smooth. Controlled. Menacing. "Welcome, Mother." The broker stepped forward. Not a shadowy ghost. Not some faceless criminal. But a woman. Mid-40s. Sharp jawline. Eyes that didn't blink. Margot Lenner. I staggered, disbelief cutting deeper than any blade. Andrea had said she was arrested. That the network had been broken. But here she was. Commanding the operation. "Thought you could outsmart me," she said, cold and calm. "Turn my world upside down and live to tell the tale." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "This ends tonight." She smiled. "Ends? Oh no, dear. This is only the beginning." Suddenly, the doors slammed shut. Locks clicked into place. "You've walked into my world," Margot said. "And now you're part of it." Mark looked at me, panic in his eyes. "We need a plan." Andrea's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Stay calm. Backup is on the way." I looked at Margot. Her smile didn't waver. The broker wasn't just a puppet master, she was the puppeteer pulling every string. And I was tangled in her web. The hours that followed were a blur of whispered orders, tense standoffs, and the slow crawl of time as we waited for the team to breach. Margot paced, talking on a burner phone, her voice icy, relentless. She threatened names I recognized, names that made my skin crawl, officials, business owners, even a judge. Then she turned to me. "Your son was weak. You are weak. But these children? They are my empire. And you will never touch it." I didn't answer. I just waited. Because in the distance, the faint hum of sirens was growing louder. Help was coming. When the raid finally happened, it was chaotic and swift. Men shouted. Shots rang out, none directed at us. We were escorted out, hands raised, adrenaline surging. In the aftermath, Andrea pulled me aside. "Margot's arrest will send ripples. But Halberd, the real broker, is still out there." I looked at my children, safe in Claire's arms. And whispered, "Then we find him." Because this fight was far from over. If you've made it this far, please like and share to help others hear this story. It's not just mine. It's a warning. Margot's arrest was only the opening move in a game much bigger than I had imagined. The media spun it as a massive sting, one woman's operation finally brought down. But behind closed doors, Andrea and Jasmine worked tirelessly, piecing together a vast network that stretched like a spider's web across states and continents. Halberd remained elusive. A ghost hiding behind layers of proxies and encrypted communications. Days after Margot's capture, my phone buzzed again. No number. No message. Just a single image. A family portrait. Familiar faces, smiling, arms wrapped tightly. Emily, Lucas, Claire, and me. With a shadow looming behind us. Unseen, but unmistakable. The broker's warning. We're watching. Andrea increased security around us. Surveillance cameras. Safe routes. New identities on file. But the psychological warfare had begun. I felt it every time I closed my eyes. Every time the phone rang with silence on the other end. Then came the first break. Jasmine traced a financial transaction, a large, unmarked transfer moving through several shell companies. It was a breadcrumb. A clue. The first solid lead on Halbert's location. Andrea called it the heart of the beast. We planned a covert operation. The team would strike quickly, quietly. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be part of it, or just stand back and hope for the best. But the look in Emily's eyes, the fragile trust she had in me, gave me no choice. The raid happened on a foggy morning. A sprawling estate hidden behind layers of security. We stormed in. Found evidence of trafficking, money laundering, and corruption. But Halbert? No one there. Instead, we found a room filled with monitors. Screens displaying live feeds from dozens of homes, including ours. It was a chilling reminder, we were never really safe. As we left, Andrea handed me a file. Inside, a single photograph. A man. Sharp features. Cold eyes. The broker's face. The hunt was far from over. And I was running out of time. The photograph felt like a punch to the gut. Sharp jawline. Piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. This was Halbert. The man behind the chaos. The one who controlled everything from the shadows. Andrea briefed me in a sterile conference room, far from prying eyes. "This is Alex Halbert," she said, voice low. "A wealthy businessman with ties to several powerful organizations. He's ruthless, cunning, and extremely dangerous." I stared at the image. The man looked calm, almost smug. As if he knew the fear he could wield with a single phone call. The next step was clear: find him before he finds us. We dove into surveillance footage, financial records, and communications. Alex Halbert was a ghost online, using multiple aliases, offshore accounts, and proxies. But there was one weak link. A woman. His right hand. Someone known only as Lena. Andrea said, if we can get to her, we might find Halbert. Days later, we caught a break. A sting operation led by Jasmine uncovered Lena's safe house, a remote cabin in the woods outside the city. Andrea and I drove there in silence, armed and ready. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. Inside, we found evidence of trafficking operations, ledgers, phones, maps. But no Lena. Instead, a note. "You're closer than you think." Back at Claire's, I showed the note to the kids. Lucas looked worried. Emily clung to my side. I promised them we'd keep fighting. That we'd protect them. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling we were walking into a trap. The night air was thick with tension as Andrea and I approached the cabin. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a warning. We moved quietly, weapons drawn, eyes sharp. The cabin door was unlocked. Inside, the smell of damp wood and stale cigarettes hung heavy. The place looked abandoned. But signs told another story: recent footsteps in the dirt outside, discarded food wrappers, fresh tire marks. Andrea scanned the room with her flashlight. She found a stack of documents, shipping manifests, phone numbers, coded schedules. All connected to Lena and her operations. But Lena herself was gone. Only the note remained: "You're closer than you think." Back in the city, the tension grew. Nathan's old contacts were disappearing. People who once whispered his name now refused to answer their phones. Andrea warned, "They're closing ranks. Halbert knows we're coming." One night, as I tucked Emily into bed, I noticed something odd. A small black device beneath her pillow. A tracker. My blood ran cold. I removed it carefully and called Andrea. She arranged for a full sweep of the house. Nothing else was found. But the message was clear: they were watching. Determined, I dug into Lena's contacts. One name stood out: Marcus, a former enforcer for Halberd's operations. He was ruthless, known for disappearing anyone who crossed him. We had no idea where Marcus was now. But one thing was certain. If we wanted to take down Halberd, we had to get to Marcus first. Marcus was the ghost everyone feared but no one saw. An enforcer with a reputation for making problems disappear, permanently. Andrea warned me, if he's involved, you're already on his radar. I started seeing signs almost immediately. Cars trailing me on quiet streets. Strangers lingering near the kids' school. Odd phone calls, breathless silence, then a click. I felt their eyes everywhere. Watching. Waiting. Andrea's team tracked Marcus to a rundown motel 3 hours away. Jasmine organized a raid, but it had to be surgical. If Marcus caught wind, he'd vanish again. I volunteered to go with them. Partly out of desperation. Partly because I needed to face this nightmare head-on. The motel room was a mess. Clothes strewn across the floor. Empty bottles. Phone chargers left plugged in. No Marcus. But on the nightstand, a single card, a black playing card. The Joker. And a message scrawled in red, "I'm closer than you think." Back in the car, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A distorted voice whispered, "Stop looking, or she disappears." Emily. My heart stopped. The moment that voice whispered Emily's name, the world tilted. Every breath, every heartbeat, every thought condensed into one urgent truth: they had her. Andrea and Jasmine sprang into action immediately. Every call was traced, every lead chased. But the trail was cold, purposely so. I sat in the safe house, clutching Lucas and Emily close. Trying to be strong. Trying to be steady. But inside, I was breaking. That's when I realized something. This story isn't just mine. It's yours. If you've ever felt powerless watching someone you love disappear into shadows, if you've ever wondered how far a mother will go to bring her children home, this is for you. If you're listening now, where are you from? Because no matter where you are, no matter your story, we're connected by this fight. The next days blurred into a desperate search. Every tip, every call, every whisper of hope chased with exhaustion and fear. And then, a breakthrough. A woman matching Emily's description was spotted at a truck stop on the highway. We moved fast. But the fight wasn't over. Because behind every rescue, there's another shadow waiting. And the battle for my family, and for so many others, was far from finished. Thank you for being here, listening. If this story moves you, please like and share it. Because no one should face monsters alone. The night we found Emily, the world felt like it stopped spinning. A tip led us to a rundown cabin miles from the highway, far from the city lights and prying eyes. Andrea's team moved quietly, carefully, like shadow warriors reclaiming stolen lives. When we burst through the door, Emily was there. Small. Fragile. But alive. Her eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, everything else disappeared: fear, pain, the long months of fighting. She ran to me, and I held her like I never wanted to let go. The days that followed were slow and hard. There were tears and silence. Questions without answers. Dreams haunted by shadows. But there was also hope. Hope in the way Emily smiled again. In the way Lucas wrapped his arms around her. In the way we rebuilt our family, piece by fragile piece. Nathan remains behind bars. Margot and many others are facing justice. The network cracked, but not destroyed. Andrea warns me the fight continues. That the shadows will return. But I am ready. Because now, I know what strength really is. It's a mother's love. Unbreakable. Unrelenting. Forever. Thank you for following this journey. If this story touched you, please like and share to shine a light on those still lost in darkness.